At first, it was just a pizza box. Cardboard, grease stains, a few crusts left behind. The kind of trash a city forgets in seconds. Someone eats, someone walks, someone throws it away. And by morning, it should be gone. But this box didn't disappear. It was watched. It was collected. It was opened. And inside it was something no killer can fully control. Trace evidence. For years, the Gilgo Beach case sat like an open file that wouldn't close. Women had disappeared. Families waited. Remains were found along a lonely stretch of road near Ocean Parkway on Long Island. There was sand, brush, cold wind, and questions that kept coming back with no answer. Who had done this? How had he stayed hidden for so long? And why had the evidence never been enough? The case became known by a place, Gilgo Beach. But the victims weren't a place. They were people. Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Amberlynn Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, and others whose names would later be tied to the same long shadow. For their families, this wasn't a headline. It was a wound that kept opening. Every news report, every anniversary, every possible clue, every silence from police. A case can go cold on paper, but it doesn't go cold for the people waiting. For them, time doesn't solve anything. It only adds years. For more than a decade, the story seemed to belong to the unknown. There were clues, there were theories, there were mistakes, there were names whispered, chased, and dropped. The public saw a mystery. The families lived inside one. Then, the case changed. Not loudly, not with a confession, not with a dramatic scene in some dark alley. It changed the way old cases often change. Someone looked again. A new task force went back through the evidence. Old notes, old phone records, old witness statements, old pieces of information that once seemed separate. A case file is never just one thing. It's a box full of small things. A phone number, a vehicle description, a call made at the wrong time, a name that appears near another name, a pattern that only becomes visible when someone stops looking at the pieces alone. One clue pointed back to a vehicle. A witness had described a distinctive truck connected to the time one of the women disappeared. A Chevrolet Avalanche. Not a weapon, not a confession, just a vehicle. The kind of detail that can sit in a file for years, waiting for someone to ask the right question. Who owned one? Who lived nearby? Who moved between Long Island and Manhattan? The answer led investigators toward a man who didn't look like a monster in the usual way. That's one of the more disturbing parts. He didn't live in a cave. He didn't vanish into the woods. He had a house in Massapequa Park. He had a job. He worked as an architect in Manhattan. His name was Rex Heuermann. He worked with buildings, plans, measurements, permits, small details that had to line up. And for years, investigators would later say he had lived beside ordinary people living an ordinary life. A commute, an office, a home, a routine. That's what makes cases like this so hard to look at directly. Not because evil is always strange, but because sometimes it knows how to act normal. Investigators kept going. The truck wasn't enough. A truck can point, it can't prove. So they looked at phones, burner phones, cell towers, movements between places, and slowly the pattern began to tighten. Calls connected to victims, phones appearing near certain locations, a suspect's personal phone moving in ways that seemed to line up with other phones. It wasn't one giant clue. It was a net. Thin strands, pulled slowly, one by one. But even then, something was still missing. A case can have suspicion. A case can have patterns. A case can have a man who seems to fit too well. But a courtroom needs more than a feeling. It needs something that can sit still while everyone argues around it. Something physical. Something small. Something that doesn't care what anyone says. That's where the pizza box enters the file. January 2023, Manhattan, A man throws away his trash. There's nothing dramatic about it. No chase, no flashing lights, just a pizza box going into a garbage can. Most people throw things away because they believe the object has stopped mattering. The meal is over. The box is empty. The city'll take it. But investigators were watching. And to them, the box wasn't empty. It was an opportunity. They recovered it. Inside were leftover crusts, napkins, the small remains of an ordinary meal. But ordinary things aren't silent under a microscope. A glass remembers a mouth. A cigarette remembers a hand. A napkin remembers skin. And a pizza crust can remember the person who bit it. The DNA from that pizza crust gave investigators something they needed. A sample. A biological link. A way to compare the man they were watching with evidence connected to the victims. The pizza box didn't solve the case by itself. This matters, because real investigations aren't magic tricks. They aren't one perfect clue dropped from the sky. The pizza crust was part of a larger case. The truck mattered, the phones mattered, the timing mattered, the old evidence mattered, the renewed attention mattered. But the pizza box gave the file a different kind of weight. It turned suspicion into something harder, something that could be tested, something that could be compared, something that didn't depend on memory. Memory fades, witnesses doubt themselves, records go missing, stories change. But DNA is different. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it can say one important thing. This came from him. And once that sentence enters a case file, the room changes. The strange part isn't that trash can become evidence. The strange part is how often people forget that it can. A person can plan, a person can hide, a person can use aliases, burner phones, routes, routines. A person can divide his life into rooms. This room for work, this room for family, this room for the thing no one is supposed to see. But the body is careless in ways the mind is not. It sheds, it touches, it leaves behind. A hair, a cell, a trace on a crust of bread. The body tells the truth in crumbs. That's why the pizza box is so unsettling. It doesn't look frightening. It has no menace, no sharp edge, no dark symbolism. It's just garbage. And that's exactly why it matters. Because the object he thought had no value became valuable. The thing he discarded became something investigators protected. The thing he left behind became something the case could speak through. Think about that moment. A man believes he's throwing away lunch. Investigators see evidence. He sees trash. They see a door. He thinks the object is finished. They know it has just begun. That's the quiet reversal at the center of this case. The powerful thing wasn't the pizza. It was the assumption. The assumption that the ordinary world forgets. That a garbage can is an ending. That a box in Manhattan can't reach back to bodies found near a beach years earlier. That the small things don't count. But small things are often what survive. A receipt, a button, a fiber, a shell casing, a bottle, a hair, a pizza crust. Human case files are rarely about the object itself. They're about what the object proves. And what this object helped prove was simple. A person can spend years trying to control the story, but he can't control every trace. As the evidence came together, the trap tightened. The old vehicle description, the phone records, the movements, the DNA, the pizza box. Each piece alone could be questioned. Together, they formed something harder to escape. The case that had seemed frozen began to move. In July 2023, Rex Heuermann was arrested. For the families, an arrest is not the same as peace. It doesn't return anyone. It doesn't undo years of waiting. It doesn't give back the birthdays, the calls, or the ordinary days that were stolen. But it changes the silence. It gives the unanswered thing a name. And years later, the case reached its legal end. Heuermann pleaded guilty. He admitted what the families had waited so long to hear. And he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the real center of this story is not him. It shouldn't be. That's the trap with stories like this. The killer becomes the shape people remember. His face, his house, his habits, his tricks. But the better question is not how clever he was. The better question is how long the victims had to wait for the world to catch up. The better question is why the case stayed open for so many years. The better question is what finally changed when investigators treated old details like they still mattered. Because evidence doesn't always arrive new. Sometimes it's been there the whole time. Waiting in a folder, waiting in a witness statement, waiting in a lab, waiting for someone to pick it up again and say, "Look closer." That's what the pizza box represents. Not a miracle, not a clever twist, a reminder. The world is covered in records of what people do. Most of them are boring, most of them are thrown away, most of them vanish without any meaning. But sometimes, one survives long enough to tell the truth. A cardboard box, a greasy napkin, a leftover crust, a thing so ordinary no one would stop to look at it. Except someone did. And that is how a piece of trash became part of a case that had haunted Long Island for years. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. It carried what the man left behind. It didn't know his name. It didn't know the victims. It didn't know the beach, or the families, or the years of waiting. It only held a trace. But sometimes a trace is enough. In the end, he wasn't exposed by something grand, not by a speech, not by a symbol, not by the kind of clue people imagine when they think of murder cases. He was exposed by something he believed was worthless. A pizza box, a crust, a small piece of ordinary life. The kind of thing a man throws away when he thinks no one is looking. But someone was looking, and the trash remembered.